service user involvement and people with lived experience involvement in informing policy is really important and really vital, but it's not something that we always do naturally as councils. So I think that kind of whet the appetite for continuing that work really in some shape or form. And I'm a local councillor. I'm actually myself from a low income background and I'm still on a low income. I'm a single mom. I've got 3 kids still at home. And that's quite unusual. It's quite unusual for people in that situation to become councillors and be in a position to actually influence the poverty agenda. And so when I was appointed to this additional role, I just spent a lot of time trying to find out what it is that we're doing within the council, and looking at what the poverty landscape is like nationally, and just thinking, well, what is it that how could we add to what we've already done? And also through the course of my first year as a councillor, I sat through quite a lot of meetings, full council meetings, where we talked a lot about climate emergency. And there was a lot of cross-party agreement and support and enthusiasm around that agenda. And I just thought, I know that's a really important agenda. It's vital, that doesn't, and particularly now, after with the crisis, we've got opportunities there, and it's important that that doesn't go off the boil. But at the same time, I could understand from the point of view of someone who knows what it's like to live on a low income and worry about just basic things like food and housing costs and running out of petrol for your car and just things like that, trying to juggle the bills, that the climate emergency can seem quite remote. It's not the first thing that you think of when you wake up in the morning, and it's hard to kind of make headspace for that. But it's really important because the climate emergency agenda has lots of crossover with the low income agenda. And if we want to kind of build a more environmentally friendly future, we're going to need to take people with us on that journey, including people that are on low incomes. So any sort of climate friendly economic solutions that we have need to be within the remit of a just transition to people that are on low incomes, and it needs to be made clear to people how it's going to benefit them and how they're included in that and not left behind. But also people who are on low incomes they can't put it on the top of their priority lists in the same way that other people can. And I just think if we want to be relevant to people as a council, we have to talk about the things that are relevant to them in their immediate life and their immediate struggles. So Joseph Rowntree Foundation said that the number of workers entering poverty was rising faster than employment itself. So something's going wrong when that's happening. And so I thought, okay, well, we've got grounds really for declaring a poverty emergency. There's over half of the people that are relying on food banks are in work. So whereas we used to think of work as the natural route out of poverty, alongside things like education, what we understand better now is that actually poverty leads to poor educational outcomes, which then in turn, leads to greater poverty, and that work isn't necessarily a solution in and of itself, because you can be on poverty wages and increasing numbers of people are. So that in itself constituted a poverty emergency from my point of view. But then the COVID pandemic hit, and obviously that's had a disproportionate impact on people that are already on low incomes, in addition to, it's going to push more people into that situation as well. So it seems like at the moment there's an opportunity for us to think afresh about how we organise things, what our priorities are. And I think that we need to put people and poverty right at the centre of how we reshape our economy and our society, alongside climate change as kind of joint emergencies, really.
You've mentioned the climate emergency a few times, because it is sort of the obvious thing to compare it to.
Yeah.
Across the country, there's been a lot of councils that have declared climate emergencies,
Yeah.
and then haven't necessarily sort of done much about it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's sort of the steamrolled ahead with other projects. So are you confident, I suppose, in terms of Cheshire West, that with this declaration, if it's made, there will be sort of positive action to go along with it?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time making sure that it, because that's my biggest dread, really. We're really good at doing that, I think. People, in politics at all levels are really good at writing documents that sound fab and then just don't change anything much at all. And that would be such a waste of everybody's time and such a waste of the opportunity we've got right at the moment, while there's so much change happening naturally anyway. And I think we have to harness that. So I've spent quite a lot of time, too much time, probably obsessively putting this document together and wording it in a way that is really, really clear. You know, it sets out really tangible, clear steps that we're going to take. I've tried to look at it across a whole range as well. So we're looking at, you know, we're making a commitment to work much harder on how we gather data around poverty so that we understand those disproportionate impacts much better. And not just ourselves as a council, but also working more closely in partnership with the university and the academics that are looking at social justice issues and you know, hunger and all of those kinds of issues, because we've got some really good academics and research going on locally within Chester. We want to also join up with anybody nationally who's doing research on this agenda as well, particularly around the disproportionate impacts of COVID and lockdown on people on low incomes. Also, I've set out in there that I want us to work more closely with a wider range of unions, because obviously they have a finger on the pulse of how this pandemic is affecting the lowest income and lowest status workers than we do. When we run our consultations as a council, it's not usually the people that are in the middle of a financial crisis that are answering our questions about what our priorities should be online. So their voices are invisible when it comes to democracy, and I think that that really has to change. So data collection, creating an online platform so that we can share what we're doing and what progress we're making, but other councils that also declare poverty emergencies can share their good practice with us and with other councils as well. With that data, I don't want that data just to sit there. I want us to use it to inform not only how we reprioritise locally, so that this levelling up idea isn't just an idea. You know, it has to be realised in the plans that we're putting together at the moment for recovery. We want to reprioritise where we can to make sure that those who have been most harshly impacted really are supported, and not just in terms of what we normally do, which is just accept the grim situation and maybe help out with food parcels or maybe help to reduce evictions, which in and of themselves, they're great things and they're needed. But rather than just accept it, I think that we need to look to the future and have a look at, well, if we're looking at economic development, what models of ownership might suit, you know, the climate agenda and the changed economy that we now find ourselves in, and also benefit low income communities, because there are good practice examples out there of community ownership that we could start to sow the seeds of locally as well. But we'd have to, you know, enable people to meet and become educated about what that means, and also to have contact with other working class people who've already set up successful businesses, you know, cleaning businesses, where they've managed to increase employee status, income, and job satisfaction. You know, we're always going to need cleaners. Are there other ways that we can do business that can start to not just regenerate, but really empower people that have been the harshest impacted? So I'm really serious about that levelling up agenda, that it's so easy to talk about and not really change anything. What I want from this is for us to actually start to take some quite ambitious steps, one at a time, just to see if we can start to shift the balance of poverty locally.